All right, thanks. So we're going to get started with our next talk. We have Daniel Foraker.
Yes, 3 for 3.
I have used students' names so much, and I'm not done with it. This is good.
And I'm just going to, this could be interesting. I'm building a mind, the future of artificial intelligence. This is cool. Thanks, Daniel.
I hope so. All right, so good afternoon. I would like to start out with a quote for you guys. Supposing, for instance, that the fundamental relations of pitch sounds and the science of harmony in a musical composition were susceptible of such expression and adaptations, the analytical engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. So what this is saying is that the machine would be able to create any type of music that a human could ever possibly imagine. When do you think this quote was said? Go ahead, guess.
1865.
Any other guesses? Not you. You are actually close. This was said in 1842. We're talking about a computer here. It wasn't the type of computer that we're thinking of. This was a mechanical computer, but it was a computer. Bonus points. Does anyone know who said this? Ada Lovelace. She is largely considered the first computer programmer. And she was a woman too, so I always like saying that. But here we go. Almost 200 years ago, somebody was thinking that we have a computer, a machine, that could do anything that a human can do. A little bit more recently, Alan Turing in 1950 wrote a paper called The Imitation Game, and he described this game. We have two participants, a man and a woman. We put each of them in a separate room. They can't communicate with each other, but they can communicate with a judge. And it's not audio, they would be like typing on a keyboard or something, so it's all text. But the question is, a judge, separate from the two of them, would he be able to tell which one is the man and which one is the woman just by asking questions? That's the imitation. So you would think, yeah, if they ask questions and get answers, one might try to mislead the other, say, I'm the man, no, I'm the man, whatever. But you could probably figure that out. So what Alan said is, what if we instead replace the man with a computer and have the computer behind the screen sending messages? Would you be able to do the same test to have a judge determine which is the computer and which is the person? These days, it's pretty easy to say, well, that's the computer. It's not making any sense. It's not answering my questions. But Alan Turing thought it would be possible. In fact, he thought it would be possible by the turn of the century. And we're 20 years beyond that now, and we're not there. So it's a difficult thing. But a lot of smart people have thought that it's very possible for a computer to think and act just like a human. So we're looking at artificial intelligence. The idea that a computer can be just like a human. And we've had some successes in this. We've had AI programs that have beaten the world's best players in a lot of very intellectual games, like chess. At one point, it was thought that if a computer could beat a human in chess, they would be human level, because they thought that the skill needed and the thought needed to play chess would expand to all different realms of life. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but we've done this. They're much better than us. But the computer still doesn't have the general intelligence that even a toddler would have, to be able to look at the world and to learn something new, to take something from one realm and apply it to another. But perhaps we've been using the wrong approach for our AI. These up here with the game playing, we start with the problem and we say, how can we solve this problem? maybe the approach we should be using is by starting with what we think intelligence is and building on that. And we have a model for that. We know intelligence exists in ourselves. So perhaps we can model a computer after our own brains. So this is my friend here, the neuron. This is a layer 5 pyramidal cortical neuron. Ones like this and billions others make up our brains. It's got a bunch of parts to it. The little glowy bit at the bottom is the soma. That's the body of the cell. That's where the nucleus is. All the little branches coming off of it are dendrites. And then all along the dendrites are these synapses. And the synapses are where it communicates with other cells. Another cell will fire, send a signal into this cell, and eventually this cell will have enough inputs that it will fire itself. Now we actually have a good way to model this already. We have this program called Neuron, and it does a very complicated biophysical simulation of a cell. And this is the kind of input or output it produces. Over a period of time, it'll track the voltage of the cell, and when it hits a certain threshold, it'll spike. The spike is when it would send a message onto other cells. Problem is, this is very slow. That was sped up 4 times. It took 165 seconds to simulate 6 seconds of actual neuron activity. So that's too slow for us to be able to link a bunch together and try to make a more interesting structure. So what kind of solution do we have for that? Well, I found a paper last year about neural networks and the neural network model of what a brain is, or a neural network model of a neuron. And I'm not going to go into it too in depth here, but a neural network is basically like a filter. It takes in the inputs, puts it through all those hidden layers in the middle, and then on the end it'll output a prediction of what the voltage is and whether it spikes or not. And what the authors of the paper found is that this runs about 2,000 times faster than the neuron simulation. Let's see. Yeah, so the paper I use, this is an example of the output that they got. The cyan color on there is what the neuron model gave them as the data, the output, and the magenta is what their neural network model predicted. So they had a very good prediction on that. It was almost 100% accurate. I decided to go ahead and make my own data set for this to kind of use the neuron program to make my own inputs and outputs. And I had a lot of difficulties, to say the least. When I put it into the model, it did not perform very well. Again, the cyan is the actual, and the magenta is what neural network predicted. And the biggest reason for that is most likely because I didn't generate the data the right way, exactly how they did it in the paper. So I'll have to go back and work on that some more. But what's important about this is as I was running these, I had to do 128 simulations in the neuron to get this. And that took my computer at home just about 6 hours to do it all. When I fed it into the neural network, less than 3 minutes. So the speed is a huge benefit here. But my accuracy sucked. Compared to their almost 100%, I only had 57% accuracy. There's a number called the variance, which is how much of the data can be explained by the model. I had a negative variance, which is not something you usually get. It says that the data was really noisy, the model couldn't make heads or tails of it. And I used a normal distribution instead of the Poisson that they described in the paper because I couldn't get the Poisson working. So I think that's the main reason why my data sucked. But there's still valuable information we can get from this. It shows that the neural network may still be too narrow, that the neuron program will actually simulate any inputs it's given because it's based on what an actual neuron will do. This neural network can only learn from the information that it's given. So it can't handle anything else that it hasn't been introduced to before. And the more varied that stuff is, the harder it will be to predict that. So we've got some work to do for the model. Next steps for this, take a look and see what do actual neuron inputs look like. When I'm standing here giving this talk to you, what do my brain waves look like? How are my neurons firing? I need to find out how that actually works so I can give those inputs to the neuron cell, get the outputs from that, and then run that through the model to see what it says. I need to generate a model that's going to, or a data set that's going to look like his results. And then once I do that, I also want to test whether this neural network model can predict something called long-term potentiation, which is the fact that when you give a neuron a very strong input, that effect lasts for a long time, that it will continue firing stronger. This is what explains the plasticity of neurons, and actually is a big part of how learning happens, and memory is all because of this long-term potentiation. So being able to replicate that in a single cell would really start taking us a long way to putting them together, building more interesting structures, and eventually to build a mind. Thank you. Any questions?
Plenty of questions.